So let's talk about yesterday because there is just a feeling that and a mentality about this team that just seems very weak. Weak. I mean, the Giants will say all the right things, next man up, something about a submarine that we heard from Joe Judge yesterday about a sinking submarine if you're looking for a metaphor for this season. But Joe Judge had to challenge his team to play hard in the second half, and they were giving themselves pats on the back over it. Congrats. You're professional athletes. You played hard in the second half. By the way, you still got outscored 10-8 when you were playing against backups in the entire fourth quarter. Congrats to you. I mean, isn't it a given that you would play hard if you're on the field? If you're on the field, do you need a challenge from your head coach not to quit? I mean, I thought that was part of the culture change that was coming here with Joe Judge, that you've instilled this mentality already that this team's going to keep fighting. Do you actually have to go in and challenge your team and say it? And then look at the results. I mean, last week, Patrick Graham was challenging his defense. We're going to see who stands up and we're going to see who's got heart. Well, the results weren't that great for the defensive side. And then you're going to challenge your team at halftime, and the result is you got crushed again, Moose. I mean, if we want the evidence here, is that this team is all too satisfied with patting themselves on the back for good job, good effort. That's crazy.
You came out of that yesterday thinking Judge was patting himself on the back?
Yes, because he starts to sound like Adam Gase at the end of these press conferences when he's saying, wait a minute, we are focused in meetings. We're having really good practices.
Well,
if you could see, wait, hold on. If you could see our guys, they're emptying the tank. And then after in the second half saying, yeah, we saw guys who came out and didn't quit. I feel like that's the given that they shouldn't quit. If you're on the field, you shouldn't quit.
Yeah, but in reality, we know teams do. I mean, in reality, we've seen teams go out there and give you no effort.
Well, the Giants aren't supposed to be one of those teams.
I get it, but they were a 1-4 team going into the game. I mean, in all reality, right? In all reality, it was ugly yesterday out at MetLife Stadium. There's no other way to put it. When you're down 28-3 at the half, when the stands are emptying after the halftime ceremonies where they honored the Super Bowl team from 10 years ago, it is empty. We saw John Mara getting booed in the Eli Manning festivities a couple weeks back, and we talked about that. Mara kicking a garbage can after a loss. All of those things that we've seen from the Giants, but
he's gonna have to upgrade to kick it over something bigger.
Yeah, let's look at the narrative. The narrative, though, of the Giants, should they have kept this game closer? Okay, yeah, I would probably make the argument that the Giants, as we've discussed before, the Giants have been sticky in these games. Costos talks about that. Ken Barkley from You Bet a Lot. When you look at it historically from a betting perspective, that they hang with these teams that are, where they're 7, 8, 9, 10-point dogs too. So they weren't sticky yesterday against the Los Angeles Rams. They got their doors blown off.
They were sticky for a quarter.
Nobody thought the Giants were winning that game yesterday. Nobody thought that.
Well, nobody thought they were going to beat New Orleans
Nobody
either.
thought the Giants were going to go into that game yesterday with what they did not have and think about winning that football game. That's just the reality of it. Let's look at it. But they were the New Orleans, as we talked about it, and you look back on that Saints game, they played a lot better defensively. It had a lot to do with the way the New Orleans Saints play offensively, a lot less to do with the way if the Giants had turned a corner defensively. So nobody thought the Giants were winning that game yesterday. It needed to look a lot better, and I would agree with you, than it did. But when you lose Kadarius Toney, you lose Andrew Thomas, when that offensive line where you had 3 starters that are now out were the one that they envisioned to start the year. But specifically, and I mentioned it last week, Andrew Thomas is a key on offense, more so than Saquon Barkley is. He really is. Because when Thomas is not playing left tackle,
right,
the offensive line is completely and utterly embarrassing, and Daniel Jones was getting knocked around. And it was embarrassing yesterday. There's no other way to put it. I mean, the Giants got utterly and completely embarrassed by Sean McVay and the Los Angeles Rams. And if they wanted to play their starters all 4 quarters, it would have been worse than the 38 that the Los Angeles Rams scored. They probably would have touched the upper 40s, or they might have even got to 50 yesterday out at MetLife Stadium. It was a downright pathetic performance. I think what Judge is trying to accomplish when he's saying that to the media after the game is that, this is not A-okay with me. And we'll get to some of the other Judge rhetoric afterwards, saying he was challenging his team at halftime when they're down 28-3, and the game is pretty much over. And for all intents and purposes, the game was over in the second quarter, much less halftime. I think that's where Judge is trying to come across when he said that to the media.
Okay, well, then everyone should just go home. If that's what it is, and if it's 28-3 and it's halftime and everyone's going to lose, then you might as well leave with the fans. because that's not what you're expecting from a coaching staff. That's not what you're expecting from players. They're supposed to come out and be representative in the second half. And like the thing is about the injuries, I'll go back.
Well, they were in the second half.
They were okay.
They were better in the second half than they were in the first half. I mean, the Rams pulled their starters, but
Yes.
it doesn't matter. In the end, the game was the message was already served. I mean, the Giants were not in the weight class of the Los Angeles Rams. You saw that clear as day in the first half. The Giants got exposed, whether it be they got outcoached, they got outplayed. And you also look at it, the Giants are missing a lot of guys. I know people don't want to talk about injuries, but injuries happen. And
I know, but they were 0-3 before the injuries.
You can't replace Kenny Golladay. You can't replace Saquon Barkley. You can't replace Kadarius Toney. You can't replace Andrew Thomas. You can't replace all of these guys that the Giants have lost, on that offensive side of the football and say, well, you know what? They're not going to miss a beat because honestly, and I like Daniel Jones. He's not Aaron Rodgers.
Okay, well, 2 of the 3 interceptions that Jones threw were bad. Very, very bad. We'll talk about Jones a little bit more. But I just think that is, yes, the injuries happen. We all know that. It's football. The way that the Giants have failed to address their offensive line, they should have 2 offensive lines at this point. They should have much more depth on that offensive line, and it shouldn't all hinge on whether or not Andrew Thomas gets knocked out of the game and is dealing with a foot injury, because it's not just like they took a small step backwards. They were not able to block yesterday, and it was totally unrepresentative of like professional football out there on the offensive line. The fact that this is still a talking point, yes, you lost your left tackle, but it wasn't even like they could even somewhat hold the fort. They couldn't do that at all. And we'll talk about the people who are missing. Maybe if, you were Kenny Galladay's out, well, you gave $72 million to a guy who was just coming off an injury-prone season. We can get into that. But think about the guys you actually still had who were there. You still had Sterling Shepard who's there, a guy who you gave an extension to. You still have a first-round pick, Evan Ingram. What is he even doing on this team if when you're missing all of these offensive weapons, Evan Ingram finished the game with, 26 yards? And the guy stepped in front of him to pick off one of Daniel Jones's passes. Kyle Rudolph was signed on this team, makes a lot of money. Where is he yesterday? I mean, you still had dudes who were left, and you could barely get anything functioning.
No, the offense was bad. But when Toney and Thomas leave that game early, you knew the game was over.
Then might as well, why don't we just pack up the pads and go home then, Moose, from your standpoint?
But let's deal with reality. You knew the game was over. The game was over.
Moose, they were a 10-point underdog going into the game, but it doesn't have to look that bad.
The game was over.
The Rams didn't play in the fourth quarter, and they destroyed them.
I agree with you, but
if you're a Giants fan, you got to be incensed.
But it tells you about the talent of Andrew Thomas and what he is as a left tackle. But we all see it. I mean, we've all witnessed it. You can't be all that surprised. We saw it last week what the offensive line was when Andrew Thomas wasn't a part of it against the Dallas Cowboys. Now you expect the offensive line now against Aaron Donald, arguably the best defensive player in the National Football League, and that defensive front to now hold up against the Los Angeles Rams without Andrew Thomas. I'm telling you, I didn't expect that.
You're giving him a pass.
I'm not giving him a pass. I'm just looking at what is the reality of. Now, you want to say that, okay, well, Dave Gettleman has had to have done a better job over the course of the years. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm just looking at the reality of a singular game yesterday afternoon out at MetLife Stadium. Big picture-wise, there are other things with this Giant organization, you're dead on correct, that are troubling with this franchise. And I've got big issues with Joe Judge, what we'll get to here in a little bit. However, yesterday, when those 2 players leave that game, Kadarius Toney had 3 catches on the Giants' opening drive. When he goes to the tent and then goes to the Giant locker room and re-injures that ankle, and Andrew Thomas is out of the game, I got to be honest with you, as a football fan, having watched this Giant team, being a big fan of Stafford and what they do with the Los Angeles Rams, sitting out there at the sportsbook at the Meadowlands, I told the game is over. The game has been decided. Name the number. It's going to get extremely ugly at MetLife Stadium, and it did, because that's the way it looked. And I thought the Giants could play with the Los Angeles Rams. Once those 2 guys went out offensively, the Giants don't have a lot of ways to turn. I mean, Daniel Jones in the second half is targeting a guy that was let go, by the San Francisco 49ers in Pettis, and was a guy that was picked up off the scrap heap by the Giants. Nice player in college, has been a disappointment in the National Football League. That's where the Giants are, and I agree with you. The Giants need to make better use of Evan Ingram. I mean, it's amazing.
Or they should have traded him coming off a Pro Bowl
season. Fans can't stand him, but I agree with you. If Evan Ingram is not catching the football, what point is there to have Evan Ingram being a part of this team?
They should have traded him after he was coming off and I'll use air quotes, Pro Bowl season. I know he made the Pro Bowl, but everyone kind of laughed at that and basically said it was more of an indictment on tight ends in the NFC than it was about Evan Ingram having an unbelievable season. You got to, or get off the pot here with Evan Ingram, because he is somebody who should be a playmaker for this team. He sure as hell wasn't drafted for his blocking ability. So if he's not going to be a playmaker when your weapons are down and you got Jalen Ramsey covering Sterling Shepard, then when are you going to use this guy? And it's
Agreed.
It's just infuriating. Even if you thought, Moose, once Andrew Thomas leaves the game, once Tony leaves the game, that this game is over, I understand. Of course, the Giants were facing an uphill battle to begin with playing the LA Rams. But the fact that it looked that bad, and the fact that they needed a challenge to keep their heads in, a challenge from their coach to keep their heads in the game in the second half, when we're talking about professional athletes and we're talking about a team that is, will be the first to tell you how much pride they have, how much there's no quit in this team, how much it's just, an execution. Remember, we were getting earlier this year, we're a couple plays away, we're this, that, and the other. They want to tell you the culture has changed, but meanwhile, it's not a given that if you're on the field, you're not going to play hard in the second half. That, to me, if I'm Joe Judge, I'm like, maybe what I'm saying or how I'm doing this or my process, maybe it's not getting through. Because we can talk about the injuries on the offensive side, and I know Blake Martinez is a big loss on the defensive side. But you have stars on the defensive side here who are still playing on this team. You had Leonard Williams with 1.5 sacks in the first quarter and a little bit in this game. You still have Adoree Jackson. You still have Logan Ryan. You still have guys you're paying a lot of money to here, and they're just not good enough.
No, they're not. The defense has been awful. And I've talked about it's been the biggest disappointment of this team this entire year, and their defensive backs can't catch a football if their life depended on it.
Goodness.
How many dropped interceptions you get from the Giants? You had a couple yesterday. You've won at least every single game. Adoree could have won the Falcon game with an interception, not being aggressive after the Bradbury interception against Washington. Bradbury finally caught one off of Taysom Hill against the New Orleans Saints. So, yeah,
I want to hear about the jugs machine, please.
Every single week you see the Giants defensive backs dropping footballs, and this secondary was supposed to be really good. They added Adoree Jackson as a free agent. This team spent over $200 million in the offseason. It has not worked for a myriad of different reasons. It has not worked, and through 6 weeks, this team is 1-5, and they're a home underdog next week to Sam Darnold and the Carolina Panthers.
Imagine.
As they come to town. I mean, that is amazing when you think about where this team is, and then you get to the rhetoric of Judge, which I want to get to here in a little bit, but I want to hear from the Giant fans early. 877-337-6666. Let's head out to Levittown. First up, Jimmy. What's going on, Jimmy?
Hey guys, I'm at a loss, and it's been hard because, you love your team, you root for your team, you buy tickets for your team, and then you sit back and watch what happened yesterday. And I'm going to tell you something right now. McVay must be very good friends with Judge, because he took the pedal off the metal in the third quarter. Moose, you said 45-50. Moose, I think they could have scored 60 points yesterday.
Yeah, they might have.
Pathetic.
I mean, name the number. Name the number. Like I mentioned, after those guys, when the Rams started getting going, watching that game yesterday at the book, and a guy who was all over the Rams turned to me and said, "Oh man, Rams, name the number. They're gonna put up 56 to 60 points today." And you could have if they.
They already hung 51 on the Giants back in 2017.
If they decided to, they could have easily tried to accomplish that goal. Now I don't think McVay would have done it, but yeah, they could have.
No, he didn't. He didn't. He hands the ball to the running backs. And he called. But listen, going forward, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what to think anymore. I thought they had a really good roster coming into this year, and I was semi-excited. You're looking at a 4-5 win team with 17 games. And what do you do? Galladay's a disaster. Barkley, yeah, he's cute and all, but you know what? You watch these running backs in this league, they hit the hole. He's a dancer. I don't know. I don't know where they go. I'm lost.
Yeah.
I feel bad.
I think
for the
they are
Mariners
too, Jimmy.
Because they spent the money.
You're at a loss and they're at a loss, and that's not a good place to be, because you have a couple things that are going to happen here, right? You're going to have a decision that you have to make about, number one, Dave Gettleman. And if he's not going to be here next year, then you shouldn't have him be running the trade deadline. That doesn't make any sense to me when anytime any team does that, not just the Giants. If he's not going to be here next year, he should not be the person who's in charge of the trade deadline, making decisions that directly affect next year. That's number one. And two, if this thing keeps going this way, Moose, because the schedule is not easy, and again, this is like a winnable game against Carolina next week, and they're still an underdog at home, and maybe that's because of Andrew Thomas's injury and some other things, but has Joe Judge done enough to distinguish himself here where you're looking at him and saying, no doubt part of the solution? No doubt he's part of the solution in the turnaround. Losses that look like this are going to continue to put check marks in the negative column for him.
Yeah, no question. And it was ugly yesterday out at MetLife. Tampa we go. It's Rick. What's going on, Rick?
Hey, Mark and Maggie. You know what? So many ways to be upset with the situation. I can't be all over the offense because of the injuries that happened right off the bat with Andrew Thomas and Tony, who we were planning for such a big game from. But yes, I agree, Maggie, that where was Evan Ingram using him when we lost those guys? So I'm going to put that aside. But what you just said, the defense, the drop interceptions, I'm so fed up with that. But how can we're going to have 2 top 10 picks next year, maybe 2 top 5 picks if Chicago keeps going down. How can we have gentlemen anywhere near that choices? So he has to go. And why is Judge playing Daniel Jones a week after his concussion in the fourth quarter? The game's over.
Yeah, because there's no quit in this team.
I've got no issue with that. I really don't.
You don't?
I don't.
Why?
Why? What's the problem with Daniel Jones playing?
If you're not going to put out an offensive line that's even representative at that point, why would you keep Daniel Jones back there? I mean, you got Peart playing right tackle. You got Corey Cunningham, where the tackle they were still getting to Jones.
The time to look good.
Corey Cunningham is playing right tackle for you, and you're like, yeah, let's keep Daniel Jones out there. Be good for him. A couple more hits to the head.
He didn't take it, but in the end, he didn't get hurt.
It's the logic. It's not about what actually happened. It's flawed.
How is it flawed?
Yeah, it's the process, not the results. Thank you, Doug.
How is it flawed?
Because you are not even putting out anywhere near representative offensive line.
He's
for your quarterback in a game that is so far out of hand. He's the captain of the offense,
and he's got to take it. He's out there in the game. He's got to take it. This is continuous. It's completely different than Wolford going in for Stafford as the game was decided, as you saw that from McVay. If you're Daniel Jones, you take it with the rest of your team. The concussion has nothing to do with it. He cleared concussion protocol.
I know, but you know how concussions work, that the more you get, the worse it is. I wouldn't even want to take that risk.
But there is no risk. He got cleared by medical doctors outside of the Giants organization. We talked to Dr. Brandon Erickson, David and myself on Sunday morning from Rothman Orthopedics and said, listen, head injuries, everyone's making a big deal about him, the way he looked afterwards. Sometimes with head injuries, the ones that don't look that bad end up being worse than the ones that look awful.
What did he say about repetitive hits to the head?
But he didn't take a repetitive. He didn't suffer another concussion. But you're leaving him out there exposed like that. Everyone gets hurt, so then it would be a case of then he should have been out of the game at halftime. I mean, at 28-3, should he have then should it have been Glennon in the third quarter?
Moose, you could have made the case. Apparently, Joe Judge told Fox that we're going to see what happens in the next 30 minutes about who the quarterback's going to be, whatever. That was very vague. But you're talking about garbage time here. You got to be able to see the difference, right? I mean, this was beyond garbage time. Sean McVay had already called off the dogs here. You don't have Darnold. You don't have Jalen Ramsey. To have Daniel Jones being there to take his medicine, take his lumps? That is really short-sighted.
Yeah,
with a quarterback that's had a head injury and multiple physical body injuries in his career. Why? You live to see another day.
Honestly, it did not bother me. If you want me to be perfect, watching that game, it did not bother me that Jones was still in the game. I've got bigger issues with Joe Judge than whether or not Daniel Jones was playing in the fourth quarter. I really do. And we'll
would
get
have
to
been
those.
different if he has suffered another concussion or an ankle injury or something. I guarantee. That's what I'm saying. The logic was flawed there.
Yeah, but he didn't. And I'm telling you, I probably wouldn't have. I didn't have an issue when I was watching it. I know there were a lot of Giant fans, and Rick, Maggie, you looking at it saying that you're bothered by the fact that Jones was in it. It did not bother me watching it at the time. He didn't get hurt. He'll be there against Carolina. He's over the concussion. It has nothing to do with the concussion or anything like that. He cleared that, went through the entire protocol, and he was A-OK to go out there and play the game on Sunday.
No, I get that he was cleared, and I didn't have a problem with him starting the game, no doubt. But I do know even if something looks a certain way and might not be representative of how bad it is, we all know that repetitive hits to the head is never a good thing. And so he already had one documented concussion this year. why you would leave him with this crap offensive line exposed in the fourth quarter, potentially suffer another, and then maybe be out for several weeks or beyond, let alone what it would do to the kid personally. Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It's not at the top of my list with Judge. We'll get to those issues.